Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphical of the Month Club. This is for December of 2023, even though it's January of 2024. This is the Kids Edition, which is my favorite edition of Club because kids are the future, and all the good stuff is being done with kids comics anyway. We've got a really good book here this week for you, month for you, and week. And it is Atana and the Firebird by Vivian Zhou, who is right there. Hello, Vivian. Good morning. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I'm doing excellent. Thanks for joining us and taking the time to sit and talk about comics with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So my first question, I ask this of everyone because I really like this question, and it's why comics? Of all the things that you could be doing, of all the ways you could be expressing yourself, what is it about comics? Because comics are a lot of work that take a lot of energy and a lot of time to do.
Yeah.
Why comics?
Honestly, I love comics and I've always read them. I grew up with comics, so my dad had like big collection of the Sunday four strip comics, like Snoopy, Garfield, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've always sort of known comics as a medium. And then I went and studied animation in college, and that's what I did for a bit. But animation is very labor intensive. It's you need a lot of resources to be able to make an animated story, but comics is a very like low barrier of entry. Anybody can draw a comic. You just need like very few tools, and then you can tell a whole complete story. So really that's what I like about it. That is like very easy to get into, I would say.
Yeah. Since your other background is animation, what would you say is the difference between doing comics, which are largely a solitary medium, versus animation, where you're dependent upon all of these other people around you to make the thing work?
Yeah. Well, with animation, it's yeah, you kind of have to specialize a little bit more. For me, I did like storyboards, so that's sort of the only part of production I would actually touch on, and then everybody else, like they each do their own part, and then everything comes together at the end, and you have
Yeah,
a story. But with comics, it's kind of like you're the character designer, you're the layout artist, you're the storyboard artist, and you're like the colorist, and you do all of these things.
yeah,
But I think that also makes it really nice because once you finish it, you can be like, "Oh, I made this whole thing." You can be very like possessive about it if you
yeah,
wanted, but like with animation, it's much more about teamwork and everybody like putting their ideas in, their skills in. So like there's pros to each method,
yeah.
but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish in the end.
Sure, of course, of
Yeah.
course. When you do story, not that I actually can ask smart questions about storyboards and animation, but it strikes me that when you do storyboards, it's all about constantly moving, right? Like the because animation doesn't stop. It's not like comics, right? Comics, you can linger on a page as a reader,
Mhm.
you can go backwards, you can go forwards. People do all the time. But in animation, when you're doing a storyboard, it's always about moving it forward. Is there is there a different creative muscle that you're using to
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, there's this when I first started like going into comics, and I thought like, oh, being in storyboards, the muscles would be like kind of the same, right? Because you're just drawing how a story unfolds. So it should be pretty easy to translate that into comics. But when I did comics with a storyboard mindset, it actually really didn't work at at all because so the storyboard instinct is to like say a character is taking a drink, you would draw the character like grab hold of the cup, take it to their mouth, and then like take a big drink and then put the cup down. But in comics, you probably only just draw like this frame. So, and if you drew all the others, it's like very convoluted for the reader. Like, why do you need all those extra panels? So I think it's very different. Um, how do you say it? Because in comics, each panel is a snapshot in time,
Yeah.
but storyboards is continuous. It all comes together. So
Yeah.
you have to think about the timing when you're drawing each frame,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It strikes me too that storyboards are for the animators
Yes.
and
Yeah.
not for the reader, as it were.
No,
Not that
yeah.
there's a reader in animation, but you know what I mean. It's not for the final audience. It's for the
Yeah.
animator to know what they have to do in order to tell that story.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
comics, as
I,
you say, are snapshots, in
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So like with each panel, you try to tell as clear of a story as you can to like move the story forward or
Yeah.
convey whatever feeling it is you're trying
Yeah.
to convey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess so it like comes down to there are different purposes to the drawings between storyboards and comics.
Yeah. And when did you first start coming to that conclusion? I have to assume it was a couple of years ago when you were doing short comics rather than when you got to the big book.
I actually came to that conclusion while I was drawing Atana.
Really? Oh wow. Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, the
Wow.
first pass of Tana that I did, when I sent the pencils to my editors, she would give me notes. And then the first round of notes, there was a lot of like, could we maybe cut this panel? And like, do we really need this extra panel here? And then like when I really thought about it, I was like, oh no, you're right. We could cut this panel because I'm just repeating myself and it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really learned on the fly with this book.
Interesting. Were you
Yeah.
was that caught in the thumbnail portion? You hadn't actually gone to actual pencils at that point, had
I went
you?
to pencils.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh my
It's not
gosh.
it's not that bad, I think. So for Atana my editor didn't review the thumbnails, so I would do thumbnails and then go straight to pencils, and then she would review the pencils. That just kind of made sense for me because I think my thumbnails are too rough to read. So they're like very not clear at all.
Okay.
So I don't think it makes sense for anyone else to read because you can't tell what's going on.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah.
How uh we'll go down this rabbit hole just a little bit. How
Mhm.
big are your thumbnails? I mean, are you literally doing thumb size
No,
drawings, or
they're like I have some scans also, we can look at those, but they're
do
like
you want to see? You want me to throw
yay
that
big.
up now? We can throw it up if you want.
Yeah,
Go
let's do
ahead,
that.
Ben. Why don't you put that on the screen? There we go.
Yeah, so here are some scans of my thumbnails for Atana.
Those are clear. Those
Um,
are clear as heck. I can totally follow that story.
okay, but this is like the beginning pages.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is like page 8 or something. Once you get
Uh-huh.
to page 80 and 100, it's like it really devolves and you can't really tell anything anymore.
Yeah.
Let me see if like I can go. Oh yeah, and then like if I make a mistake, I'll just put in some post-it notes
Oh,
and
that's
then fix
that's
it.
that's really cute. Actually, I really like that. I don't
Yeah,
think I've ever seen anyone do it that way. That's cool. I
really,
like that.
yeah, it's very DIY, but I like the feel of it.
Uh huh.
And then I'll like write notes if I can't like take hat off if
Yeah.
I've made a mistake or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And then
I can see how
sometimes,
they're getting rougher here, but it's
yeah,
still. I mean,
right,
it's
like
still. It's still clear as to the transitions and what's going on and what's happening.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's good to hear because sometimes I don't really know if I should show these to people.
No, process. I always find process endlessly interesting. Because
Mhm.
it's just because everybody does it differently too, right? The final product largely looks the same, but
Mhm.
the steps to get to that are everybody does it very differently.
Yeah.
How so when your editor said you're like there's too many panels essentially, um uh does that mean you had to redraw those pages from scratch, or
No.
were you able to cut
No.
and paste it out?
Yeah, usually I just cut and paste it out and then like expand. whatever panel it is that I decided to keep to
Uh-huh.
fill the
Uh-huh.
space of the panels that I cut out.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like a huge amount of cuts, so I didn't have to redraw pages,
Yeah.
but just like fix those bits.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you started getting those notes, I assume you hadn't like drawn the whole book at that point. That
I
that
did.
you wow. Oh wow. Wow, okay. So your editor didn't even edit you until the book was done?
No. Like all like I would do all the thumbnails
Uh-huh.
and then I would move straight into doing all the pencils.
Okay.
And well, usually when I like finished half of the pencils, I would send those to my editor,
I see.
and
Okay.
then
Uh-huh.
while I continue on to like do the rest of the pencils. So yeah, I do like pencils all in one batch. She gives me feedback on those. I revise, and then I go and do inks, and then she gives me notes. I
Okay.
revise, and then I do colors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that just it seems a little late in the process to me. That's all because if there's a
Oh,
change that needs to be made,
yeah.
comics are hard to change. That's all.
Yeah, they are.
It's not you can't just I mean if we want to sort of go to animation, right? Like you decide a scene isn't working, you can cut the scene differently and it can still work even though that you've drawn part of it. But in
Yeah.
comics, like once you remove a panel from a page, then that like really changes the page, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like I don't know if this is the best way to do it honestly because I've had with the first Atana book like there were several times when I decided quite late in like I think in pencils like when we're in final pencils or when I'm about to start inking that I wanted to do like redo a couple pages or redraw a sequence and then
Yeah.
there's like an odd number of page numbers now that like
Right.
it doesn't fit into what I originally planned. So I had to like basically go back and rename all of my files and reorganize all of my pages and the way I set it up on Photoshop was not very easy for that to happen. So I like definitely have spent a few afternoons just reorganizing all of my files because I do all my pencils in one go.
Yeah.
So, maybe in the future I'll figure out a better way to do it. But right now, this is what makes sense to me.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's all good. Are you doing comics more or less full time at this point, or are you? Yeah, so you're not working animation at all anymore.
Not right now, no.
Yeah,
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 I think I'm pretty lucky to be able to just do books full time because
yeah,
balancing another job on top, I wanted to do that in the beginning, but I think it really would have been too much work.
yeah.
Yeah, especially with storyboarding is it's very taxing on the brain. And then drawing comics is also very taxing on the brain. So if I had like two of these jobs, I would just be really tired by the end of the day.
Sure, sure. You're in Canada, so are you lucky enough to get like government grants and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Grants are a huge part of what I do. I think
yeah,
like mainly the Canada Council for the Arts for me,
yeah.
and then also local ones for me that would be Arts Nova Scotia.
Uh huh.
I like you don't have grants in America as far as I know.
Not
Right? Like
really. No.
yeah, like not the huge ones that we have here. So I think we are really, really lucky to have that support. And I didn't even know about them until I graduated. And like my mom found the grants and she was like, Vivian, you should like do this.
Uh
And
huh.
then I applied, not thinking that I would be able to get it.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, for like any Canadians thinking of going into graphic novel or like doing any sort of art project really, I really, really encourage people to look up the grants that are available to them because it really makes a difference.
Yeah, sure. Do
Yeah.
you do you think you would have been able to do the comic without the grant?
No,
No, yeah.
no. Yeah. Like I was able to first quit my job because I had gotten a grant
Mhm.
at like just the right time. So yeah, I really don't think I would be able to do this full time if I didn't have any grant support.
Yeah.
So it's super important.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's beautiful that you live in a country that supports the arts that way, you know, because
Yeah.
as you noted, we don't have that in America, and
Yeah,
you
I
know,
don't know how
everything's
American artists do it.
yeah,
It sounds
most of them
crazy.
starve. I mean, you know, and yeah, and work really hard or work three jobs, you know,
Three
and I
jobs,
mean, I
yeah.
cannot tell you how many people I speak to who like, yeah, you know, I work an 8 hour job and then I come home for 3 hours a night and draw for 3 hours a night and that's it, that's all I have to do, you know. And then even worse are the ones who have like kids and a family that they've got to
Yeah.
take care of all of that and then
Hmm.
just squeeze in the comics like
Oh,
when they should be sleeping probably.
that's honestly crazy to me.
Yeah,
That like,
yeah,
my gosh. Yeah, like I mean the burnout that follows that kind of workload is really, it could be really devastating. So
yeah,
like I understand why people do it, but at the same time I just wish there was more support for comic artists to
sure,
actually just focus on their craft and like do what
sure.
they like. Yeah. I think we
Yeah.
would all benefit from it. So
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of the reasons I think that the American comics industry ended up being so much about serialized comics because
hmm.
serialized comics are at least paying you a page rate, you know,
Right.
so that you know that you're going to make $150 a page or whatever it is, uh,
Yeah.
and you can budget and live off that,
Right.
um, as opposed to a graphic novel, whereas you know you're getting in advance and then
Yeah.
you've gotta figure out, okay, they gave me X thousand dollars. How do I live on that for 6 months, you know, or whatever the number
Try
is,
two
you know?
years.
Yeah, 2 years. Wow. Okay. I was gonna ask you that question. Well, let's actually back up a little bit here.
Mhm.
And let's say where did the idea for Atana come from?
Good question. It's a little bit convoluted.
Sure.
So I was in third year of college and I hit a point where I was kind of burned out. And I didn't know like really what to draw anymore, but I at the same time I felt this pressure that like I should be drawing right now. I should be practicing and getting better. But I didn't really like have any ideas of what I wanted to draw, so I like was like, "Oh, I'll make an OC. I'll just make a character that I can draw over and over again
Mhm.
and just do that." So I sort of drew Atana, and then right after Atana, I drew Ren, I think, and she was like a star that was falling to Atana, and I was like, "Oh wait, this is kind of fun." So it really kind of started with the characters, and I would just like doodle these characters in my sketchbook every like almost every day, and then the story came much later. I was sort of just like projecting a lot onto these characters, just like whatever was in my head, I would draw it with these characters. And then I think maybe like after a year of doing that, I was like, oh, maybe there's a story here. Like what kind of story elements can I fit into this? What would these characters like have struggles with? And what sort of like world do they live in? What is the magic system? What is the what it, like what are how are these characters connected to each other? Um, I think to me, like the connection of the characters was really important, and that was like really fun for me to figure out, like because I really like that in a story when all of the threads kind of come together at the end.
Yeah.
So it really, really just grew very slowly over the period of maybe 2, 3 years, I think, just in my sketchbooks until I think I was applying for a grant that I didn't get. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just write an outline for this. But once you have that first outline, you kind of go like, okay, wait, this is a real thing that can exist in the world.
Yeah.
So let me put a little bit more work and develop it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah. Was it did it always live in your head as a graphic novel or a comic strip? Or did you think at some point, oh, this will be an animated short or a film, or did you not know?
I didn't know, I think. I mean, obviously, I would love for it to be animation. That's
Sure,
like my dream. But it just for me, it wasn't like it's not possible for me to make it into animation at that stage of my life.
sure.
So at first, actually, I pitched it as a web comic when I
Okay.
was writing grant applications.
Mhm.
And then afterwards, I thought, oh, this story, like the scale of it is too large for me to have as a web comic because I wanted like I wanted to print it eventually and I wanted to maybe like ship it to people, but that's too much work in the distribution section and like the logistics of it was too much for me. So I was like, oh, I should find an agent and find a publisher and
Yeah.
try to see if I can get this published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you had you been doing comics up to that point?
I think the longest comic I drew before starting Atana was like 6 pages.
Okay.
I had drawn a lot of like very short autobio comics. Those are
Uh-huh.
really fun for me to do.
Uh-huh.
And then I've drawn some like really like 3 page, 4 page comics that I put on Twitter and stuff. But that's about it in terms of comics. I'd mainly done storyboards and like animation stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know like why I felt so confident going in and making a
Uh-huh.
graphic novel.
No, that's good. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I saw some of your short comics on your website,
Mm,
and they don't really look like Atana at
no.
all. Did you sort of develop a new style for Atana, or did it just
Mm,
come as you were drawing?
I think if anything, Atana's sort of the style I'm more comfortable with. That's the style that I tend to draw in when
Mhm.
I'm doing any long project.
Yeah.
And like the short comics on my website are more experimental for
Mhm.
me. I like to try new things with short comics because
Mhm.
I think that's like if you're gonna try new things, you might as well do it with a short comic. And with each comic, I feel like I want to have a look that suits the story. So I don't necessarily want all of them to have the same look, but rather what I feel is right for that specific story.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So I know they all kind of look different, and it's kind of hard to like, I guess, pitch my style to people when I tend to do something different with each comic. But I like that's just what feels right to me.
Yeah. One of the things that I really kind of took from Atana was your style is I don't want to say it's quite similar to Mobius, but it made me think of Mobius. Jean Girard, the famous French artist, you know who
Yeah.
Mobius is, but some of the
Yeah.
audience may not. He's been dead for a couple of decades now at this point. He's kind of the master of French comic art, but he has a very very fine line
Mm,
and a lot of kind of swooping lines, and the color palette is again very similar to what you have here. How much of an influence directly was he, or indirectly, or
he's a huge influence. Yes, if the art looks similar, it's because I am copying him.
copying him? Okay.
Yeah, I know I straight up looked at his art for inspiration when I started coloring Atana. When get stuck, I would just like go flip open some of the books that I have from him and I'll be like, how would he do it? And then I'll be like, no, he does it too well and I can't copy this. So I'll try like a pale imitation that is, my own thing. But definitely the colors, yeah. If it's similar, it's because I copied him.
Nice, nice. No, I think it's all in the best way too. I mean, I certainly didn't take this to be like slavishly imitating a Mobius. I just it was that feel that particularly because you're dealing like with world building and your own ideas, and it just kind of the way that he did it too. I don't know.
Mhm.
What's kind of your go-to Mobius book?
The Inkle?
Yeah,
Yeah, that one
yeah,
has some really nice layouts in it.
yeah.
And I think that's the one I have at home, so
Uh
I
huh.
can look at it.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see it. I love that notion because that's how you start. That's how everybody starts as an artist is going. Oh, I really admire this.
Mhm.
Let's people start by copying, but
Yeah.
eventually you get your own style that is it. Well, it will not end up looking like Mobius at the end, but you can still
Mhm.
see the root of it at the base. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the best advice that I got from art school, like a professor said, you have to know how to steal. But like the word he uses is steal, but what he means is that you need to take all of your influences, like different influences from different people, different artists,
Yep.
analyze what it is you like about all of that art,
Yep.
and then put it together into your own thing.
Yep.
So like not like copying one on one because that's
Yep.
why would you do that? But taking things that you like from everybody and learning what is good about it and
Yeah.
learning how to do it
Yeah,
and
I
then
might
mashing
say
it
I
into a
might say
style.
meld and synthesize rather than steal, but
Yeah, well, sounds funnier when you say steal.
it does,
So
it does sound funnier, especially if you've got a teacher, a college teacher, telling you, "Oh yeah, steal."
yeah, kids learn how to steal. So yeah, but the idea is there.
Oh, that's very funny. I quite like that. The world building part of this is I think the thing I might have admired the most because while there are certain tropes in Atana that are familiar, it really does feel like its own world. That you put a lot of thought and a lot of care into building the rules of. Now you said you spent 2-3 years developing this.
Hmm.
How much of that was kind of head time where you're just thinking about it and pondering it, and how much of it was writing and rewriting, if that makes sense as a question?
Ooh, I think a lot of it was head time.
Yeah,
Most of it was head time.
yeah,
Like, well, if head time also counts as all the times that I sort of just like doodled in my sketchbook while sort
sure.
of thinking about it. I think at one point Cosmos was like 21 years old, and
Yeah,
I didn't have an explanation of why she was that old, but
right.
it just like it just felt right in the moment. And then later I was like, no, she's a child. She's like 10. But I think a lot of the rewriting didn't happen until I got an editor. So basically until I signed the contract. And then because I don't think I had written the script until I signed the contract. Or if I did write a script, it was a very bad one.
Yeah,
So a lot of the reworking really came with help of my editor. I didn't know how to write a comic script. Like I think the first one I wrote was in like prose, like a novel,
yeah.
and it was very badly formatted and the grammar was all over the place. Um, but then when I got an editor, she sent me like a list of acceptable comic script formats
Okay.
and was like, okay, Vivian, you could pick one of these and then write the story like this so that we can both understand it, and then we'll edit it from there. Yeah, so I ended up writing it as a like a screenplay.
Yeah,
Because that just that was the thing that felt most natural to me. I don't
yeah.
really know how to write so that you have like the page breakdowns and panel breakdowns. So I just wrote the whole thing out as a screenplay, and then we started really revising it and doing a lot of work. So I really came in with like the bare frames of this story, and a lot of it was fleshed out with my editor, like all of that world building. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you the original synopsis that got shopped around, how long
Mm.
was it?
Like the final page count?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Roughly. Like,
I have no
well,
idea.
what I mean though, the thing that your agent shopped around, was it like
Mm.
3 to 5 pages? Was it 30 or 40 pages?
Oh, I think I had maybe 15 pages of
Oh,
sample
okay.
comics, and then the outline, which might have been, I really can't remember. The outline maybe like 10, 15 pages.
Okay.
I can't remember. I do know that we pitched it originally as a trilogy, and the idea of a duology didn't come until a publisher picked it up. So I'm really happy that it worked out this way. I think it works well as a duology. So yeah, like the original idea in my head was very much a lot vaguer after
Uh-huh.
the first book.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I mean once you start putting something together, then you start narrowing it down and narrowing it down and you go,
Yeah.
"Oh, here's where it actually is," you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I only like really knew what goes on in the first book when I pitched it,
Mhm.
and then like the future was just all like a hand wavy. Something happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but then it worked out. So
Interesting, interesting. The so your editor, sorry, your agent started shopping it around. Do you know how many places they submitted it to?
I have a vague idea. I don't know if I'm supposed to say, but
I mean, if you're not naming names, why not?
um, like I don't think more than 10.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But I can't remember for sure also. I remember getting a lot of rejections.
Yeah, sure.
But
Well, that
yeah,
absolutely always happens. Yeah.
yeah, but in the end like it's always nerve-wracking that period when you're pitching a project and then you get like, because the rejections come in first, right? So so in the first few weeks all you get are like a whole bunch of rejection emails and your agent's like, "It's okay. There's still like 1, 2, and 3 left."
Yeah.
And then like, and then there's like 4 weeks of nothing because those people are really taking their time and like
Yeah.
thinking about this project and thinking if
Yep.
like it's a good fit and whatever.
Yep.
And then the last, I don't know, another month later, you're gonna hear back with maybe some good news.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember that process, especially going into it as someone who didn't know anything about publishing. I
Sure.
didn't know if that was like a normal amount of time to be waiting, if that's like a bad amount of time to be waiting. So yeah, it was pretty, like it's pretty fun to think about it now. Um, but the first time is pretty
Pretty
nerve-wracking.
nerve-wracking. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see
yeah.
that. And so was Harper the only one who came back to you as, we want to do it, or did you
There
have
was
more than one suitor?
there was one other
Okay.
publisher. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, and in the end I really liked my editor at Harper. So uh, that's what we decided on.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the question I was going to ask, is how much of the decision making is sort of based upon your interplay with
Mm.
the potential editor, and how much of it, becomes just a cold hard, like, well, they offered me $10 more a page or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think for Atana it was an easier decision because the packages that the two publishers offered were very similar. So like monetary choices
Sure.
aside, it
Yeah.
really came down to
Who do you
um
want to work with? Yeah.
yeah, like which publisher, which editor like really got the story,
Yeah.
and felt like we were on the same page
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of how we wanted to develop this book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like for Atana, that was all it came down to. Either like I don't think there was really that much difference between like royalties and advance or
Sure,
anything.
sure.
But yeah.
Yeah. And so then the editor comes back to you and they're like they want to talk to you about the outline that you've given and to turn it into a script.
Hmm.
How much back and forth was there before you started the actual scripting?
I think I went into it pretty much right away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Even though you had
oh
never
no, I
done a comic
remember.
script before.
Yeah, yeah. I think I went into it right away. And like the first draft is horrible. So that's I think that's just like one of those things that
Sure. Sure.
everybody kind of accepts at one
Uh-huh.
point. Like you
Mhm.
write a draft and it's gonna need a lot of revisions. Um, but we did quite a lot of workshopping on the first Atana book because I had A, not written a script before, and also B, I was a little bit stubborn, I think. Being like inexperienced and also just it's very hard to like let somebody else into your creative space when it's a project
Sure.
like this.
Sure.
And when I was starting out, especially, I was very like maybe difficult, a little bit difficult to get feedback into. I know I no longer have that problem, and I think my editor would agree. But I think it was difficult the first couple passes where I
Sure.
was like, no, this is good already. I don't want to make any more changes.
Uh-huh.
But no, she was right. My editor was right, obviously. So we did hash it out, like hash over a few drafts, a few
Yeah.
drafts of the script, and it always works out for the better because if your editor is pointing out an issue with the script, then like obviously there's something that you're not that the story isn't like clarifying enough or is a little convoluted or whatever the issue is, there is something to fix. So you can
Yeah.
always make it better, right?
Yeah. Well, especially
I
when you're,
definitely learned
especially
that.
in a fantasy world like this where you have so much world building to do,
Hmm.
it's important to get your bones right,
Yeah.
so that then when you tell the story, that it all kind of just fits nicely on top of that framework.
Yeah. It needs a solid ground to stand on, like
Yeah.
this kind of story. So I think that's really important to establish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was it all an email or were there phone conversations or
It was
how
all
did you guys
emails
work
for me.
all yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, oh no, we did one, we did one call. Like the only call we ever did was when I freaked out a little bit over a feedback. And then my editor had to be like, "Hey, Vivian, can I call you to
Yeah.
just like like so we can talk it over?" And then
Yeah.
like once we got on the call, I was like, "Oh, so that's what you meant." And it was like, all in my head over nothing.
Right,
But
right.
that was the
It's
only
it's not
time.
it's not that you're a bad human being, it's that we wanna make the story better.
No, yeah, yeah. Like it's just this is really embarrassing. I don't. This is
No,
all really
I don't think
embarrassing.
there's anything embarrassing about this, honestly. I think this is the creative process, and I think it's good to openly talk about these things too, because
Hmm.
I think that I think a lot of time you look at the final product and you think, oh well, this just sprang from Zeus's head,
Yeah,
fully
yeah.
formed like a
No,
perfect little angel, but that's not the reality of creative
no,
work. It never is.
no, yeah.
How many drafts of the script do you think you went through?
At least 8 or 9,
Wow.
I wanna say, yeah. For
And
the
are
first
those are
book,
those are those word one rewrites or are they or the you're just adjusting things?
I'm adjusting things.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like, I might rewrite scenes or crop out scenes, but
Yeah.
the bones are there.
Yeah.
So I'm just adding, like, and editing on top.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I will say though, because the first book was such a learning process, and like I really, really, I think I really learned so much from my editor and like how the whole thing works, that for the second book, we only did maybe like 3 or 4 drafts.
Yeah.
So like significantly
Yeah.
less because I was taking feedback a lot better.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a process, and I think it only
I
gets
also
better
think,
as you keep
yeah,
going.
I also think that doing any kind of creative expression is it's very much like building up muscles, you know?
Yeah.
And once you've done that exercise enough times, you no longer need to do that particular exercise to get that particular muscle to work. It just
Yeah.
starts working on its own, you know?
Yeah. And it becomes sort of like more instinctive.
Yeah.
So when you look at a story, you're like, oh no, I know what you're talking about. Like this bit is missing or this bit doesn't flow.
Yeah.
It becomes more it becomes easier basically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and you weren't drawing at this point, right? You were still
No.
just generating scripts to get approved before you started drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually um when I first started, I had actually asked my editor if I could not write a script and just do thumbnails. But I mean, now we know obviously that was a bad idea. But because I had been doing storyboards, that was sort of the way I was like
Sure.
thinking, the way that I
Sure.
think about story.
Sure.
So I thought that would be easier. But now that I know how to write scripts, I always do that first because
Uh-huh.
it's so much easier to edit a script than
Sure.
it is to edit any drawing.
Sure.
So yeah, that's also like a process that I kind of had to learn.
Yeah.
But now that
And,
I know,
and
it's
honestly,
great.
Vivian, you may find 10 years from now that you go back the other way. That
Yeah.
like that you've internalized it all enough that you no longer need to build a scaffolding first,
Mhm. Mhm.
before you start building the house, So maybe not,
Yeah.
some people do full scripts all the way, but I
Mhm.
absolutely know some cartoonists, who I know a couple cartoonists who literally just start drawing with no pre-planning. They just
Y
start drawing and they see what happens,
Oh, you
because
would
they're
need so
assured
much
enough of
confidence.
their craft and you know, of what they want that they know that they're
Mhm.
going to get the thing that it's going to be good at the end.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, confidence, you need a lot of confidence to do that, I think.
yeah. So how long did these 8 to 10 drafts take to do?
Maybe a year,
Okay.
year and a half.
Okay.
I think a l I really think that most of the time from for the first book was spent on revising the story.
Sure.
That was the most important part. And
Sure.
then once we got all of that figured out, like the designs were pretty much ready to go, and then the art was pretty straightforward. Yeah, yeah. And writing takes a lot of time because also it's not just me writing, it's also me waiting for notes so that I can maybe do another draft and then move on to the next thing.
Hmm.
So overall, I think for any graphic novel, the writing time, you need to factor that in all the drafts
Sure.
that you're gonna do. Uh, yeah, I think in comparison, the time I spent revising the writing is less than what I spent revising the art. So yeah, but maybe that's like also like an area of expertise kind of thing. Like I'm
Sure.
maybe started off better at drawing than I was at writing.
Yeah.
So, I had to catch up my writing skills to
Yeah.
properly make a graphic novel.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, um, now I think that you said that your script was basically screenplay format, so it wasn't page by page breakdown. It wasn't page
Mhm.
one, panel one, but it was
No.
just a flowing screenplay.
Yeah.
How did you then turn that into pages? Because each page is its own unit,
Hmm.
and how two pages sit next to each other is another unit to think of.
Yeah.
And then I guess and you have chapters as well, so then you've got to think about each chapter and the length of the chapter and how the structure of the chapter is.
Hmm.
So what was your process to, as artist you, to read writer use stuff and then turn it into a comic? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where thumbnails really come in as very important for me because I don't know the final page count when I have the script. This is where like thumbnails do all of that work. So I figure out what I want in a page, like which part of the story I want to end on the page turn, and what I want for the review for the next page,
Yeah.
and also how long the final book is going to be. So for Atana, actually, I was worried personally that it wouldn't be enough pages to tell the
Hmm.
story because the script was quite long, and then I only had 250 pages to work with in the comic.
Yeah.
So as I was thumbnailing, I was also like I had done the math. I was like, okay, one page of script roughly translates to like 3 pages of comic, and 3 pages is the maximum I can do for one page of script. So like as I was thumbnailing, that was sort of in my head so that I'm keeping track and I'm not going over the page limit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so thumbnails really do a lot of heavy lifting in me breaking the script down. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would edit the script as I'm thumbnailing if I like draw out a page and I suddenly feel like, "Oh, wait, this is not flowing as well as I thought it would when I had written it." And then I would like cut or rearrange or do whatever it is. But yeah, so the thumbnailing process is really like another pass of editing the script,
Sure.
but at the same time turning it into a visual medium, so something that could become comic pages.
Yeah. Having done this process now, it, are you are you still confident that doing a screenplay style is the best way forward, or would you think about future books maybe doing it more page one, panel one, so that you're thinking of it, you're already pre-thinking of it in terms of pages?
I would not do
You would not
that.
do that. Okay, very good.
Yeah, so I'm working on my third book now,
Yeah,
and this one is like the same process as the first Atana book. It's screenplay, thumbnail breakdown, and then whatever follows. I think when I'm writing, I have certain images in my head. So
yeah.
some scenes I know, like, oh, I want this to be a big dramatic scene and I want the layout to be like this, or like,
Mhm,
oh, this is a place I would need like a full page spread and to really
mhm.
make it like, wow. But yeah, so I have like ideas in my head already when I'm writing.
Yeah,
And then when I'm thumbnailing, I'm really just figuring out how I can fit all those ideas onto the pages in like in such a way that the page turns make sense and like the spreads make sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've talked about page turns a couple times, and which is good because it's always a question for me.
Hmm.
So it seems obvious that you're actually really thinking about that a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. I want the I like I want every page to feel sort of its own mini story.
Mhm, mhm.
I think in the ideal world, that would be the case. It's not like you don't have to do that for every spread, for every page,
Sure.
but for Atana, especially because there's a lot of information, a lot of plot happening all the time.
Yeah.
It it was really important for me to like to figure out where to end the page so that it made sense to the story of this
Yeah.
spread, and then to make the reader want to maybe continue on to the next
Yeah.
page. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very, very much so. So how long did it take you to do? You said took you about a year and a half, let's say, to get the scripts to a point that you were happy with it. Once
Hmm.
you and the editor are happy enough with your scripting stage, how long did the thumbnails take you?
Thumbnails are very fast for me, like maybe 2 3 weeks.
Wow,
Or
really? Wow. For
yeah.
250 pages,
Yeah,
2 or 3 weeks.
yeah.
Wow.
Because I think because they are so rough
Uh-huh,
that
sure.
I can do, like, if I'm really focused, I can do a huge amount in one
Uh-huh.
day. Uh, yeah. So some
That's
thumbnails
that's
are the fastest part for me.
that's really, really speedy though for 250 pages. I mean, that's what does that work out to? Like 8 pages of thumbnails a day, give or take?
Uh, maybe like around 10. I don't,
Wow.
but it's not like, I for me it doesn't feel like a lot
Yeah.
because it's so rough, and also because thumbnails I draw them, like, most of the time I don't change them that much when I go
Mm,
into pencils,
sure.
but I also draw them with the idea that if the layout doesn't work, I can always also change it in pencils.
Yeah.
I'm not like bound to it really,
Sure.
and it's
Sure.
mostly there to help me figure out the pages, what I want in the pages, and then the layout.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of those are very fast, and then like pencils become a little bit more grueling.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So then that would be the next question is how long did the pencil stage take you?
I think I for Atana we were on a little bit of a tight schedule because I had taken so long with the rewrites. So pencils, I was doing a lot of pencils every day for, I think I finished it in maybe 4 5 months.
Wow. Again, that's very fast.
Yeah, I don't think I want to do that again. Honestly, it was too much even for me. So, but pencils at a comfortable pace, I can do 4 pages of pencils a day usually, if it's not too complicated.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, that strikes me as pretty fast, even when you think about like the American comic artists who were cranking pages. I think Kirby was able to do like 3 or 4 pages a day, and he's considered extraordinarily prolific. So
Hmm.
that if you're doing that as well, that's On the other hand, I don't think he didn't work from scripts at all. He worked from like a 2 paragraph outline.
Yeah.
The whole story is like you know here's roughly
He
what
had more
happens,
to
and then
figure
he's doing
out.
all the thinking about it as he's making the pages.
Yeah. Yeah. When it
Yeah,
gets to pencils, I've already done most of the thinking. Like, at
exactly.
least for the story, it's like now it's just all like, oh, how am I gonna draw this background? How am I gonna do this perspective? And
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
You did your own lettering. I'm taking it.
I did the sound effects, and
Oh,
then
okay.
everything else, Harper had a designer who did the
Oh,
lettering.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they found someone who's a really good match for you. I mean, when I look at the line quality, not quality, the line weight, maybe I don't know. It
Yeah.
it really matches your art. I would have absolutely assumed that this was you doing it.
Yeah, it looks lovely, doesn't it?
Mhm.
I think it's a font that they had,
Okay.
and it just, yeah, like pretty early on they showed me this font and they were like,
Uh
"What do you
huh.
think about this?" And it's really cute and it matches the art really well. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the designer. She did like all of that, including the title design.
Yeah.
That's all her. Yeah.
Yeah. And so were there any places, because you weren't doing the lettering yourself, were there any places that you thought that they made good or bad choices about where to put the balloons, or did you just leave enough space for the balloons that it worked out fine?
The lettering was another really convoluted thing that I did. Um, So again, I think I will have to eventually figure out a better way to do this. But basically, what happened was they sent me a text galley of all the dialogue in the book. So it's like basically like a 200-page PDF document
Yeah.
of only the dialogue.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing the pencils, I would very roughly like copy in the text from the text galley, but
Yeah.
as an image so that it's exactly the size it would be in print.
Yeah.
And then I would try to like reorganize the text in Photoshop, but
Uh-huh.
as an image. So I was like using the select tool, cutting it up and like reorganizing it, and then drawing the bubble around that. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think there must be a better way to do it, but that's how I did it for Atana.
So that means that your original art, such as it was, has the bubbles in there, but they're
Mhm.
empty.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting. Oh, very interesting.
yeah. And then I think like right as we were like doing the final touch-ups for the books, like all the art was done, we did maybe like 2 rounds of bubble edits
Yeah.
because like sometimes the bubble would be a little bit too small and then bubble
Yeah.
would be a little bit too big,
Yeah.
and then I would have to go back into the original art and like
I
sometimes drawing a little bit extra where the bubble had originally
understood.
covered
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's I think for my next book I would try something else so that I don't have to edit the bubbles and then the art underneath.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was how I did
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting process. How long did it take you to do that lettering pass then?
Not too long. The
Uh-huh.
Because my designer does all the lettering,
Yeah.
so I just try to adjust the bubbles based
Okay.
on it's a lot
But
of
even I
like
actually what I meant, I'm
I
sorry. What I meant was even the initial bubbles, including the initial bubbles.
oh, I
Like,
just drew those in as I was penciling.
okay. So
Yeah.
that was a very quick process then.
Yeah, so that's just part of my pencil quota
I see.
for
Okay.
every day.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay. 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 All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I like to think of the bubbles as part of the page as
Yeah.
well. So
Sure.
I tend to think of it as I'm drawing each
Yep.
panel so that it makes sense and I don't have to worry about it later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, no, it makes sense. Except when, as you say, that you change something about it and then you've got to change the size and shape and
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Are you all digital or are you drawing on pencil first and then scanning?
So the only part I do traditionally is the thumbnails and then
Hmm.
I scan those in and everything else is digital.
Everything's purely digital. Okay. Very
Hmm.
good. Um, do you do you have a strong feeling about that, or is that just given the tools that you had that seemed like the most expedient?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I definitely so when I first drew Atana, a couple of the sample pages I did traditionally. I
Yeah.
lined them traditionally and then I scanned the lines in and colored the lines.
Yeah.
And I really like doing things traditionally, but for a book of this size and on a deadline, it takes a lot more time
Sure.
than it would if I did everything
Sure.
digitally.
Sure.
So for efficiency's sake, everything is digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, does that mean that you had less of a traditional inking pass?
What do you mean?
Well, so some people who
Mhm.
draw digitally, once their pencils are down, pencils and inks are the same thing at that point. There's no difference between those two steps.
I've never heard of that before.
Okay. So
Pencils and
yeah.
inks are the same thing?
Well, yeah, because if once you've drawn the pencils in, then it's just a matter of adjusting the line weight rather than going over the art. So traditionally, inking
Oh,
is embellishing your pencil. You do your
yeah.
pencil, and then you go over the pencil to
Hmm.
get it to look exactly the way you want to. But some people who work digitally, pencils and inks are essentially the same thing.
Oh. Oh, I never heard of that before.
Well,
It's
I mean, this
definitely
is the great thing about comics. Honestly, is there's a million ways to do it, and
yeah, yeah.
they're all right. You know,
Yeah. No, that seems like a very efficient way of drawing comics.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
but if
you do have two separate and distinct steps. There's a
yeah, for
penciling
me
step
it's
and
two
an inking
steps.
step. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I think my pencils are fairly clean,
Uh huh.
but not clean enough to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
final art.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
all
so
good.
it's two steps for me.
Yeah. How long was the inking process then?
Inking, I think it was similar to pencils
Okay.
because I have less to think about at the inking stage, and it's mostly just about making the lines clean
Yeah.
and make sure like all the compositions are working and the
Mhm,
bubbles look okay. I
mhm.
think the bubbles are honestly the most difficult part of drawing inking because you want like a perfect circle, but it's
Right.
not always perfect, and
Right.
yeah, it's the bubbles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know that the variation in hand doing it is good. It's part of the sort of the quality of comics, and it's
Hmm.
part of the reason I think that I thought that this was your handwriting, uh,
Oh.
because there's an organic level to the bubbles themselves.
Mm.
Uh, and then you did the coloring yourself.
Hmm.
I picked up there. So
Yeah.
well, what about the coloring stage? About how long did that take?
Coloring went a lot faster,
Okay.
but it's a lot harder also
Yeah.
for me. Coloring is not my strong suit necessarily. So, and like, there's something about drawing a comic where mentally I'm kind of ready to tap out by the time I've finished inking it. So, for me to go back and start coloring the whole thing is like, oh no, now I have to do this.
Sure. Well, it's at
But
least your fourth time through, right?
yeah,
At least.
yeah.
And so I totally understand that. That is that's pretty normal, I think.
Yeah, you get so tired of looking at your own art out like at some point in this whole pipeline, you're just like, I'm done with this. Don't make me look at it anymore.
Yeah.
But you have to keep working on it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, the final product is it really is beautiful, and
thank
it's
you.
rich, and the world feels lived in, and the world feels logical. So I think you did just a fantastic job on this, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really good. Um, cool. So, and you said that obviously there's a book two here.
Hmm.
Um, are you done with Atana book two? No.
No, I finished penciling it.
Okay.
So next step is inking
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
coloring. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if everything goes well, it will be out by summer 2025.
Uh-huh.
And if it's not out by then, you will know that things didn't go well. But yeah,
But theoretically, because you're just at sort of your inking coloring stages, you might be what, 3 months from finishing book two?
no,
No,
at
more.
least another half a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Uh, yeah, inking usually takes the bulk of that time.
yeah.
And I think Atana too, there's some difficult pages to draw. So those will also take some time, I think. Yeah. And
Excellent.
overall, I would like to just be able to slow down and breathe a little bit as I'm
Sure.
inking, because Atana 1 very much felt like I was like cranking out pages every day, and I was like, I have to get this done, I have to do this right now. And it
Hmm.
was a lot of stress. So for the
Hmm.
second book, I would prefer to like really take my time on every
Yeah.
page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, sounds good. Sounds good. How is the reaction to the book been so far? Are
Good.
you happy with how people are taking it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most importantly, my close friends like it and my parents like it. And that's enough for me. So I don't expect that everybody's going to like it. That's
Uh-huh.
not and like that's not really what I aim for
Sure.
anyways. But the people that I care about all like it. So
Yeah.
that's good enough.
Well, I liked it quite a bit, so
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, no, it was really good. There's a level of beauty and thought in this that it's pretty exceptional stuff. Well, very good. So let's start wrapping it up. We're
Mhm.
we're we're a little over an hour here. Um, so I usually end with the same two questions. The first one is there something else you want to plug? Obviously, you're working on Atana too. You mentioned there in the middle somewhere that you're already working on your third book.
Yes, my third unannounced book that I can't talk about yet.
Understood.
So
It's not an Atana book though. It's something
no.
something different than this.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a new original graphic novel and it's also middle grade, but it's a completely different story, different world,
Nice.
different style.
Are you working middle grade because that's where your affinity is, or because that's what you think the market wants, or because that's what your agent wants, or is
It's
it just like this is where my heart is?
um that's a good question actually because I don't actually think about the
Yep.
age range when I'm coming up with a story. I
Yeah.
usually just come up with a story and then I'll send it to my agent and I'll be like, I think this is middle grade or I think this is YA, but I'm not sure. What do
Yeah.
you think? And then
Yeah.
my agent will be able to tell me like, oh, I think this is more middle grade or this is more YA or whatever it is. So that's not really one of the things that I consider when
Yeah.
I'm writing a story. And I have like nebulous future plans of making like slightly older
Uh-huh.
stories or even slightly younger stories. And it
Sure.
I think it all depends on the story and what it ends up becoming as I'm writing it.
Yeah.
But it's usually my agent or the editor that decides really like
Uh-huh.
what
Uh-huh.
market, what age group it
Uh-huh.
fits best into. Yeah.
Was there anything in what you did that either your agent or your editor thought needed to be changed? Like this is a middle grade book, so it's a little too scary on this page, or you shouldn't have used that particular word, or was it just that part was hands off?
Um, so story-wise, usually not a lot of changes.
Yeah.
I think the only thing was maybe like if a character was too old for the age
Mm.
range.
Mm-hmm.
But also in my stories, I don't tend to like say outright like this kid is 13 and this kid
Yeah.
is 15.
Sure.
So it's also a little bit ambiguous and it's up to the reader to kind of decide like how old is this kid to you.
Sure.
I think the only thing in that happened in Atana 1 was I had this is also kind of embarrassing, but I had accidentally used a swear word that I didn't realize was a swear word because I learned that friend by no, I learned that word by my friends using it in an affectionate way. So that I put, I put that word into the book, and then I got a note from my editor like, "This is a middle grade book, and we cannot put this word in." And I like that's how I learned that that word was a swear word. It's not like a particularly bad one,
Yeah.
but but that was
I'm
the
I'm
only.
not going to ask you what that word is, but everybody at home can try to think of all the swear words that you can think of and think about what it might be.
Okay, I can tell you after.
I love it. I love it. All right, and then the last question, and it's, as we were talking earlier, this is a series of interviews. You are somewhere in close to 250 cartoonists that we've spoken to,
Mhm.
and so a lot of people, watch these interviews with an idea that they themselves want to be a cartoonist. And I certainly hear from a lot of people who say, oh, I want to do this, but I'm just not sure of myself. I'm not sure how to start. I don't know if I'm good enough. All of the things that as a beginning creator you burden under. So if you had a piece of advice for someone who wants to make comics but is unsure of how and what to do,
Mhm.
what might that advice be? It can be something physical. It can be something about process. It can be something emotional or philosophical. Answer it any way you like to, but I always love to hear people's advice for young cartoonists.
Hmm. I think for me, it would be make short comics.
Mm,
Make a lot of short comics, like 3, 4 pages, 15 if you're really feeling it. But make like self-contained short stories. They can be autobiographical. It doesn't really matter. But I'm a big advocate for short comics because I think it's a great way to experiment
yeah,
with your craft. You can test out different styles, different ways of paneling, different stories that you want to tell, and it's very low stakes. It doesn't matter if it's not good because it's
yeah,
only 2, 3 pages and you didn't spend like 2 years on it.
right,
And like it's easy to share, and if you like it, then it can go in your portfolio. I actually don't know much about making a comic portfolio, but like you will have a little collection of comics that you made and that you can
yeah,
show to people and be like, hey, this is what I can do. And these are all finished comics.
yeah,
So yeah, make short comics. They're really fun.
yep.
Make
Sounds great.
zines. Those are fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds exactly right to me. Well, very good. I want to thank you for taking the time to speaking to us today.
Thank you so much
Um,
for having me.
yeah, I hope you had some fun with this, and I just based upon this as a first long form work, and how strong I thought it was, I cannot wait until you have 20 years of experience behind you, and what you're making 20 years from now, because I
Oh my
just have
gosh.
this feeling that they're going to be amazing.
Well, I hope I can finish
Assuming
all the
assuming
comics.
that you have the intention to keep doing it for 20 years, I
Yeah,
I,
I
I
got
shouldn't I
stories in
shouldn't
me.
curse you to that necessarily. But
Yeah. At least I have 3 books that are promised. So I have to get those done.
very good, very good.
Yeah,
All right, hold on for a second. Let me do a
mhm,
little bit of housekeeping here, and then we'll come back and close the show. Okay,
sounds good.
Ben, put me on a one, please. Hi there, you at home. You wonderful person. You're sitting at home. You haven't read a good book lately. You want to read something really interesting. You want to read something rich, both emotionally and in a world building way that has something original to say. You know what I recommend? I recommend Atana and the Firebird by Vivian Zhou here. This is a really good book. It is lush. It is gorgeous. It's vaguely European in all the right ways, and it really is a book that you will really really like. Um, if you want to buy a copy of this book, you can get it from our website. That maybe the URL will show up sooner or later here. There's also, I think, a button somewhere that you'll be able to click to just take you straight to the store and get a copy from us. So think about that, because this is a really really good book that you will really 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 enjoy. So this is a strong recommendation I'm giving to you. Our next couple of shows, because we basically skipped the month of December for doing live shows, we're doing a show every single week in January. This is our second of 4. Next week we have another Kids Club book. This will be the January Kids Club book. It is Skip by Sarah Burgess. and it's about jump rope competitions. And it's a lot of fun, and it's got a very nice, really kind of pastel look to it. I think you'll like this a lot. And then the week after that, we go back to the adult club, and our book is The Great British Bump Off, which is basically a murder mystery set at the Great British Baking Show. And it's funny, and it's a great murder mystery, and I think you'll like this one a lot as well. So those are the next two shows coming up. John Allison and Max Sarin for that show, two Sundays from now. So please check back for both of those. You know, you can hit the bell and you can subscribe and all those things. You know what to do. Everybody knows how this stuff works at this point. I want to do a couple thank yous, because it takes a lot of people to make a show happen. I want to thank Jordan, my producer. He does a bunch of stuff that nobody sees except me, really. But we couldn't do the show without him, and getting things arranged. I want to thank Ben for running the show, doing the camera angles and changing things around, etc. I want to thank my staff, Zoe, Kat, Katie, and Max, for being the best staff that a comic shop could possibly have, and allowing me to be able to sit and talk to cartoonists and have fun doing this. I wouldn't have the hours in the day if it wasn't for how great they are. So I really appreciate all of them. I want to thank all of you readers out there who are buying graphic novels and who believe in comics. If you like this series, join the clubs. We have an adult club, we have a kids club. But even if you don't, we really appreciate you watching these shows, and it makes a big difference. And then finally, and kind of most importantly, I couldn't do any of this without cartoonists. So I would like to thank cartoonists, especially like Vivian Zhou there. Thank you so much for making comics and doing comics and giving me something that I can talk about and talk to you about. It means a lot to me and the other 2,500 comic shops in America. It really truly does. So thank you.
We couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a small world after all.
Yeah.
So excellent. Okay, well, very good. You stick around after the credits, but everybody else, I will see you next Sunday, I hope. Take care. Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book. The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.